This is John Kohler with GrowingYourGreens.com. Today I have another exciting episode for you, and I'm coming at you on a field trip. I'm all the way in Aberdeen, Maryland, and we're about a half hour away from Baltimore right now. And the field trip today that I'm excited to share with you guys is actually, we're here at Veteran Compost. So Veteran Compost is a facility that composts food scraps to make compost for people that live in the local area. So I'm really excited to be here because I'm going to get to show you guys their whole facility, how they make standard compost, also how they make the worm compost, but more importantly, how they're taking a bite out of all the waste that would normally go to the landfill. So I guess without further ado, actually let's head up onto the facility here and show you guys what they're doing. Now we're here at the Veteran Compost facility, and the first place the compost starts is actually with the truck here. They make actually regular pickups 6 days a week of the input material. So this is basically the food scraps and food waste with the small amounts of cardboard that they're actually going to turn in to the compost. Now they've just done a pickup, so actually I'm going to unload a green bin which is full of the compost. But why is this important to actually reuse the food scraps and make it into compost instead of letting it just go to the landfill? Well, if you put food scraps in the landfill, it basically just rots. It does not make any compost. It creates methane gas, which is not good. And we want to try to remove things and not put that much stuff into the landfill. So I mean, there's so many different things going into the landfill that does not necessarily have to be there, like the food scraps, like yard and waste trimmings, like cardboards, like many plastics can be recycled. But many places in the country don't actually have programs to do this. So I'm glad that a place like Veteran Compost is filling the void or filling a niche. And more importantly than just filling the niche, it's actually an American-owned business, actually a veteran-owned business. So the owner, Justin, came back from overseas after his stint in the military and didn't have a job. And instead of trying to go find a job, because finding a job can be tough in this day and age for military, for vets, or for anybody, he created his own job to fill a need, to make a successful business, doing the right thing by removing food scraps out of the landfill, but by also enabling farmers, especially organic farmers, to grow more nutrient-dense crops by using compost and even the worm castings. So anyways, let's go on a journey of how the food scraps come off the truck through the composting facility to make compost and actually also feed worms to make worm castings. So now we're on the back of the truck, and these are all the different bins that they get in like 6 days a week to take out into the field and compost. Now you guys might think that composting is really easy, but it all starts with the source material. So if you got contamination in your source material, including plastic straws and utensils and all this kind of stuff, it's not going to work. So I really like that Veteran Compost here does education with the institutions, from preschools to supermarkets and large businesses, to take the waste, to train them properly so that they only get a good input. Now, if you're composting in a home, it's really easy to sort and sift through all the different things you're going to compost. But when they're dealing with, tons of bins coming in every day to compost, it can be quite challenging. We're just literally going to take one of these guys off the truck now and take it up and dump it and show you guys what they mix the food scraps with to make some of the best compost in Maryland. All right, so we're going to take a ride on this lift gate down and dump this guy out. So this is composting on an industrial scale. I mean, this windrow or row of compost is literally about half the size of a football field. It's totally huge. They got all kinds of stuff composting on top. I don't know if you guys can see that on the top, but it's actually steaming off the top because it is so hot. It's obtaining like 150 degrees inside there. And we're about to dump this onto the pile to feed the compost pile. A good compost pile is always going to have some good inputs, and let's go ahead and put this nitrogen input on the compost pile, and we'll share with you some other inputs you'll need for a successful compost pile in an industrial setting like this, or even at home. So before we dump our tote here onto their massive compost pile, I want to share with you guys the 2 essential elements to composting. Whether you're composting on a small household scale, like hopefully many of you guys are or will after this video, or whether you're composting on a large industrial scale like they are here at Veteran Compost, 2 ingredients. Number 1, you need the food scraps, or other yard and waste clippings, which is the source of the nitrogen. The nitrogen is very important so that compost will happen effectively. Aside from that, number two, you need what's behind me and what they're getting free from local tree service companies. And what that is, that's the wood chips. So you can see the pile of wood chips behind me. This is the carbon element. So when you mix the appropriate amount of carbon with the appropriate amount of nitrogen inputs, you're going to get some compost happening, which is what you can use to rebuild your soil. So next, looks like they're piling up all the wood chips here, and then they're basically mixing the wood chips off in the pile that I'm going to show you guys next with the food scraps. So that makes a complete system. So next we're going to go ahead and roll this bin over and dump it on their pile. Now I'm ready to dump this bin here with all the food scraps onto their large windrow with just all kinds of wood chips and food scraps sitting here, composting down. But before that, I've actually been saving my own compost for the last couple days here. So we're going to go ahead and make a contribution on my organic food scraps. Now, I always encourage you guys to eat a diet rich in fresh fruits and vegetables where you'll generate a good amount of compost to go back into the soil to grow your plants. Next, let's go ahead and open this guy up. Only food waste, and let's see what we got inside. We're rich. We're rich in oranges. So orange juice, definitely one of my favorite things to consume, and it looks like this is a whole tote of oranges. We're gonna go ahead and mix this up with the wood chips that have been pre-laid down, and then we'll share more with you guys about how this specific composting is working here at Veteran Compost. All right, let's dump it over. Oh, best workout I've had all week. All right, got all those guys out. Now the cool thing that sets Veteran Compost apart from other companies that pick up compost or food waste is that every time after they pick up the food waste, they actually take the bins and clean them out. So when you get your bin back, you get a nice clean bin. I don't know how many times I've composted in my own bins at home, and they're just kind of funky and they smell bad. You know, they're literally taking the smell out of composting by cleaning the bins, and they're running a real clean operation here. I mean, when I drove up, I smelled no funky smells, even though all this compost is happening. Next, let's take a look at the mixture and what they've been dumping on their compost pile. So you guys can now see all the oranges that I just dumped here. Now besides the oranges, they got to add the wood chips in here. And what's the ratio of wood chips to food scraps? Well, in general, they use about 3 parts of wood chips to 1 part of the food scraps. So since I just dumped like 1 whole bin of the oranges, they'd put like 3 bins of the wood chips approximately. And they adjust this depending on the load they're getting in. Now besides just the oranges, they could be getting things in like different, paper towels and different things like that, or even things like the green stripe. And this is actually a eco-compostable cup made out of the PLA material, which is the corn based. So these guys will compost down if you have a hot enough pile. Unfortunately, most people do not have a really hot pile. And what we're going to talk about next is how they maintain a hot temperature of 150 degrees in this pile so that it all breaks down faster and sooner rather than later. I know many of you guys out there may have a compost pile that's been sitting there for years and you haven't got any compost out of it. That's because it's not active. So next we're going to share the 2 most essential components to ensure you have an active compost pile that's going to work sooner so that you can make compost now rather than later. One of my favorite mottos is that compost happens, but it'll only happen if you do it right, because I know many people, including myself back in the day, had compost piles that just wasn't working properly. So besides the carbon to the nitrogen ratio, and in general you always need more carbon than the nitrogen inputs, you also need a few other things. You need the right moisture percentage. So it can't be too wet, it can't be too dry. They can adjust this by adding more something like a dry material like the wood chips instead of a wet material like the wet food scraps, and they could also adjust this by maybe watering the pile if it gets too dry. The other thing that's very critical, it's missing from most piles from what I've seen, is air. We need some air, the oxygen, which is going to encourage the breakdown of the wastes inside there. So how they're doing that here is they got these perforated tubes going through the bottom of the pile, I don't know, every 10 feet or so, and they got these blowers here that'll blow oxygen through. Now if you don't have a big industrial pile like this, you may not need a blower. Just simply putting in some perforated tube through the bottom to get some airflow is definitely a good thing. You could also do a similar thing by actually turning your compost pile. You know, I'm lazy these days, so I don't like turning my pile. Instead, I like the compost tumblers. So be sure to check my past videos on how to use a compost tumbler properly for the best results and make some compost in just about a month or so from what I've experienced. So after the compost been sitting for about 1 to 2 months, it's ready to be sifted out. What the sifting does is remove all the large fragments and all large materials, including trash that may have gotten into the compost. They're taking the loader here, they're loading up and putting it through the compost sifter that's going to sift out all the bad stuff and only keep the good stuff. Let's take a close-up look at some of that fresh compost coming out. As you guys can see, the compost is coming off the top of the conveyor there into another pile. Now, making a good compost is like making a fine wine. It gets better in most cases with time. So after this is sifted once, it actually sits for a little bit more period of time until it's ready to be sold. And before it's sold, each batch is individually tested to ensure seeds will germinate in it. So that's definitely a good thing. You want to look for that when buying compost or making compost for yourself. Before harvesting it, test some. Make sure some seeds will germinate before you harvest it, or you might need to let it go a little bit longer or do something else to it. After the compost has been aged for the appropriate amount of time, it's all ready to go. Now they do sell the compost by the cubic yard here. With the loader, drive up your truck, they'll fill your truck up with it, or actually more convenient for those of you guys that don't have trucks, you can actually buy it by the bag. So they've just been bagging it up here with a scoop and the bag, and they just take the scoop and fill up the bag. One scoopful at a time. Now just before I came out to this trip, I was actually sifting my own compost, filled up 3 good large bags of compost. Now I want to encourage you guys always to use compost as your primary source of nutrition to add it back into your garden. That's of course along with things like the rock dust and the trace, which provides your plants with trace minerals. But the organic matter in the compost is imperative, in my opinion, to having a healthy garden. So I'm continuing to fill up this bag, and the one thing I want to share with you guys is, you know, before you buy any compost, you want to take a whiff. Wow, it should have a nice neutral smell. I mean, if it smells too strong, like gross or something, it's probably not a good compost. Besides that, you want to ask or find out what's in the compost that you're buying. I mean, I see the stock they're using here. They're using the wood chips and the food waste, which is my favorite inputs to use in a compost. Many composts may use high amounts of animal manure or other things going in the compost. I think the food waste and the wood chips and other yard clippings is some of the best compost you could make. I definitely would agree with this is probably some of the best compost that I've seen here on the East Coast so far. It's very similar to the compost I use on the West Coast. Now I always encourage you guys to source your compost locally. You know, it's almost a waste to ship compost throughout the country. I think it should be made locally, and there should be a business such as Veteran Compost in every city, hopefully even run by veterans, to make compost, to distribute to the local area, and more importantly, keep food and other things that can be composted out of the landfill and back into people's yards so that they can grow some food in their front yard instead of having to be dependent on the grocery store. So I'm just about done bagging up this bag of compost. We're gonna go ahead and tie this bag off here. And now next I'm gonna do something special. We're gonna sign the bag. It's gonna get my autograph. This is the Growing Your Greens bag. And we're gonna autograph it. All right, so one lucky viewer that comes out to visit Veterans Compost, maybe the next one, He's gonna get to buy the bag that I filled myself, that you guys seen on this very episode. Get out to Veteran Compost if you live anywhere in the area, even if you're not the first one to pick up this bag. I could definitely say if I lived in the area, this is the compost that I'd be using to fill my garden. Now, one of the reasons why I like them here at Veteran Compost is that because they're always thinking. Now, besides just making the compost, they're gonna actually turn this compost into another kind of compost that you've heard about many times on my show. It's actually happening over in the barn. So let's go ahead and show you guys what they're doing to this compost to make a whole different kind of compost that, in my opinion, is even probably more beneficial to your garden than the standard thermophilic compost that we just saw how it's made. Now we're gonna get to show you guys the last part of the compost facility here, and we're in literally an old barn. And inside this old barn, they're making some more compost. And actually, here's one of the cool compost sifters they have. They have at least 3 compost sifters on site. You got to see the big one. They got the smaller one, then they got this other cool one. I mean, they got all kinds of cool gadgets that I've just been geeking out on here. Anyways, let's go into this barn and show you guys the other kind of compost that they're making here at Veteran Compost. The other way they make compost is they make vermicompost or worm compost with their finished compost. This is really cool. Most people will use food scraps and other things to feed their worms to make compost. But you know, when you use food scraps, it could attract, you know, bugs and different things and kind of be all messy. This is probably one of the cleanest worm composting facilities that I've ever seen. I mean, they're using their finished compost, which provides the worms rich organic matter, and there's literally no bugs or no flies or nothing happening. And what they do, they simply put their screen finished compost down here. They make sure the moisture level is right. They need to be like 80% moisture, and they literally let the worms compost the compost they already generated that was made from food scraps and wood chips. I mean, this is probably some of the finest worm compost or worm castings you've ever seen anywhere. Man, it looks awesome. Oh, and there's a worm stuck on me. And once again, smelling this stuff, there's no odor. It's totally neutral. That's definitely a good sign of some definitely healthy worm castings. I personally believe worm castings are actually more important to your garden than just the standard compost. So I'd recommend adding as much worm castings or vermicompost to your garden as you possibly can. If I was starting a garden, I'd probably use like, 1 bag of the worm castings to maybe like, 6 bags of the regular stuff to fill a nice raised bed to grow some delicious food. So the last thing we're going to get to do in this episode today is we're going to sit down and talk with Justin, the owner of Veteran Compost here, who started the business because he was a vet that came back and didn't have a job. And he's really excited about the composting, the vermiculture, and I've shared with him a lot of ideas that hopefully he'll implement soon in the future to create even a better product for local gardeners and people here in Maryland and the East Coast. Now we're here with Justin, the founder of Veteran Compost. Glad he could share a few minutes out of his busy day with me. And Justin, so why did you start the Veteran Compost?
I got home from being an active duty service member. For 5 years I was a combat engineer officer, so my day-to-day job was construction and explosives. However, there's just not that many jobs for guys with dynamite on the outside, so I had to find something else to do. And I really like sustainability as a field, and as I looked at different recycling business models, I came across composting. A lot of potential material. 2/3 of what gets thrown out every day is compostable. And the day I opened in Maryland with a shovel in my hand and money in my pocket, I was number 3. So I got a bronze medal just for showing up. So how can you beat that as a business?
Wow, that's great. So currently, like what, 100% of your workforce is either veterans or families of veterans, is that correct?
Correct. So everyone we hire, we have preferential hiring for veterans or immediate family members of veterans, since typically anyone that in the family that can support a veteran is good by us.
Awesome, awesome. So another part of this is that I want to teach others to do what you're doing. I mean, other veterans in other states and far off places could do what you're doing, literally start a company and use the food waste and the wood chips in their area to create a business like you've done. So would you recommend this as a course of action for other veterans and other people out there that want to do something productive and help the earth and help people and make a living at the same time?
Sure. I mean, I think as if you have a bucket and a shovel, I mean, you're pretty much in the compost business. So it does have low barriers to entry. It's not like launching the next Facebook. So I think there's a lot of potential benefits or opportunities. I think it tends to though be very specific to your local area. So I think if this is something you're interested in, you need to pay attention to what are the local rules or permits that might apply to this. What are the market conditions? Is this something that people around me are interested in? Is there enough people that want food scraps collected or enough people that want to purchase compost? So, it's just like any business, I would look at just the general kind of what's going on, the lay of the land, and then just try to get smart on composting. It's a little bit of a leap from the backyard to the commercial side, but at the same time, I think it's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of materials out there. Places like Cornell University have free resources on the web, so you can go and find a lot of material out there on how to duplicate things like this if you're willing to do all the legwork.
So Justin, let's talk more about your inputs that you just mentioned. I mean, your two inputs are food scraps and wood chips. And so why don't you use yard waste and things? Because this is pretty much yard waste free, right?
Yeah, I think compost is a lot like the food that you eat. If you use the right ingredients and good ingredients, then you know where they came from, you're going to have good results. So what we try to do is stick to food scraps that we collect, so we know all the sources that provide it to us. And then typically we only use wood chips because it's chemical free. Yard waste in this state comes in plastic bags, so to remove it from the plastic bag is nearly impossible. And then just the concerns about everyday insecticides and pesticides and fertilizers that are available. I mean, you can walk into places, large box stores, and buy scary amounts of long named chemicals and apply them to your yard, and then mow your grass and put those grass clippings in the green bin at the end of your driveway. So we just have a lot of concerns about keeping chemicals out, and that's why we've chosen to only use the ingredients that we do.
Wow. So, I mean, if somebody's not in the local Maryland or surrounding areas to come here and pick up some compost from you guys, what would you say you recommend that they look for when they're buying some compost, and make sure they're getting some good stuff and not just some, wood chips that are lightly composted in a bag?
It is. I mean, the definition of compost is very vague depending on what state you're in. So a lot of the labeling is state to state. So it may be very strict in some states and very vague in other states. So what I would just look at is when you flip a bag of any product over, it's going to say derived from and what the ingredients are. And so I would look at what materials went into that product, what chemicals, if any, were added, what types of materials were used in the making of that. I would also look and see where it was made or who made it. A lot of times the most popular labels, whether they be the store brand or other very popular brand names, didn't actually make the product. So if you can actually do it depends on how much research you want to do, but understand that what may be on the front of the bag may not be the person who made it. So I think it's important to look at what was in it, and then also just basic chemical analysis. Any compost should be a neutral pH, so there are other things that are out there. That's the best, easiest way, either looking at the pH or smelling the product or touching it, if you can find an open bag, just to get a feel for what's in it. It should smell earthy, it should look like soil, and touching and smelling and the product will also help.
I definitely agree. I mean, I've smelled the stuff that he's making here, the compost. It's excellent stuff. I wish I lived in this area because I'd probably buy a whole bunch of this stuff to have in my garden, and I'd have an amazing garden. Plus, I've been talking to Justin throughout the day to maybe give him some more tips and tricks on what he might be doing in the future. Hopefully he'll be adding some rock dust in with his compost to make it a one-stop shop with the rock dust with the compost built in already. Justin, if somebody wants to purchase your compost from you or your worm castings, let my viewers know how they could get a hold of you so that they could do that.
Sure, you can go to our website, so veterancompost.com, or our Facebook page, facebook.com/veterancompost. You can order stuff and pick it up all the way from Philadelphia to Northern Virginia. We also do sell worms and compost tea bags and vermicompost through the internet and ship it to 48 states in the Caribbean. So if you go to the website, we're pretty flexible guys. If you have a problem, we have the compost. So.
Awesome. So if you guys come out, Justin has a special offer for Growing Your Greens viewers. If you come out to pick up compost here, you'll get a free compost tea bag so that you'll be brewing your own compost tea from the worm castings that they actually made here. Plus, if you're the first viewer, you can even get that signed bag by me.
If we don't frame it, that's right.
If he doesn't frame it. So in any case, I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode learning about how compost can be made. I mean, the few points that I want you guys to remember is, number one, if you're not already, make your own compost. Number two, if you're not making your own compost, you need to buy compost. Make sure you know what's going in the bag, what's in the compost. Try to visit the facility, and hopefully they'll have an open door policy to show you guys what's going in it so that there's no things going on behind closed doors. I like that Justin was able to show me the whole facility here. He has nothing to hide, and he's only doing great work. The final thing is I want to reduce the amount of things that are going to the landfill. So composting and recycling are the primary ways to do that, and try to use things that are already on site in your garden and reuse things instead of even recycling them. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Once again, my name is John Kohler with growingyourgreens.com. We'll see you next time, and remember, keep on growing.